Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about a mod for the original Medieval Total War. Again, this is one of my favorite Total Wars of all time. It might be my favorite Total War of all time due to its really amazing campaign mechanics, battle mechanics, and not to mention its atmosphere and its soundtrack, really second to none in the whole series. So, as you can see, this is the XL mod for Medieval Total War. And XL is, I'd say it's probably one of the most famous mods for it. There's also Redux, and there's several others that I'm going to be talking about in the future. But I just wanted to showcase this one first. XL. So I like XL here because it actually has the vanilla campaigns right next to the XL ones, so it's really easy to show the difference. So, the vanilla campaign for Medieval Total War, while it is, more realistic, more historical than Medieval 2, of course, that's one of the reasons I was so upset with Medieval 2, because in a lot of ways it's a step back from Medieval 1, and Rome was as well. Medieval 1, let's take a look at the vanilla early period. So, there are a lot of issues with this start position. So, the Byzantines have way too much territory here with this start position, and it's way too easy to play as the Byzantines here. And then, of course, while there are amalgam factions in Medieval Total War, there aren't as many as in, Medieval 2. So, over here you've got the Italians amalgam faction. The Holy Roman Empire is, you can probably categorize that as an amalgam faction. But one of the nice things about this is you have Aragon as its own faction. Aragon sort of gets lost for Medieval 2, but then of course in Medieval 2 you end up getting Milan and Venice as separate factions, which is nice, right? But losing Aragon, that's something I didn't like. I felt that was a sort of step back. You get Portugal in Medieval 2. You don't have Portugal here. Of course you have Portugal with a very strange start position. Anyway, that's enough of the vanilla. So here's the XL campaign. So as you can see, there are a lot more factions. The start positions are much more historically accurate. So let's take a quick look here at the new factions that have been added in the XL mod. So you've got the Almoravids. It's not the most historically accurate start position, of course. At the start date here, the Almoravids should control more of North Africa and not really Southern Iberia. Of course, there are the Taifa kingdoms in Iberia. If you've played Chivalry Remastered's early campaign, you'll see you've got some really interesting Taifa factions there. A lot of other stuff is the same as in vanilla medieval early era. So you have Aragon, same position. You have the Armenians added as a faction instead of the Byzantines controlling Kilikia. You have Bohemia added as a faction. I mean, as you saw, the Holy Roman Empire was just very bloated in the middle there. The Byzantine start position is pretty interesting at the start here, but they're in a weaker position because the Seljuks are in a stronger position, and they're actually in a position to take some of these eastern territories of the Byzantines. Really hard to hold the whole thing in this mod. You have Castile-Leon. You have the Cumans added, of course. Denmark is in vanilla. The Fatimids, of course. Genoa is added as a faction. Now, it is a sort of amalgam faction still. As you can see, Genoa here controls Pisa's territories as well, because, Pisa is controlling this Tuscan region as well as Corsica and Sardinia, at least parts of it. So Genoa is kind of an amalgam faction there in XL. You have Ireland added, which is interesting, nice to see. You have pagan Lithuania for the early era. Pretty interesting to see them there in an early era campaign. You've got Norway, you've got Novgorod, you've got the papacy is a playable faction here, which is kind of cool. You have Portugal added, which I think everyone is happy about. You have Scotland. Of course, Scotland was also added in Medieval 2, so you do get some. Okay, I'm giving Medieval 2 too much of a hard time, probably. And then, of course, the Seljuks, the Serbs, new faction here for XL. Sicily, Sweden. Sweden is a new one. Venice, of course, is a new one. Again, a sort of amalgam between Venice and Milan, rather than just being Venice, which is an interesting choice. And then, of course, the Volga, Bulgars. But let's quickly get back here and show off the high campaign. So as you can see, the high period is quite interesting, much better than, I think, the vanilla high period campaign. As you can see, there are some very strange choices in vanilla high period campaign. So in the vanilla high period campaign, the Byzantines' start position makes me feel weird inside. So you have, the Byzantine Empire, which of course, this is a post Fourth Crusade start date. So the Byzantine Empire is shattered and doesn't exist at this point. But you have, Nicaea here, supposed to represent the Empire of Nicaea. You have Rhodes also under their control. You have Cilicia under their control, which doesn't make sense as that's a separate kingdom. And you also have Georgia under Byzantine control, which again doesn't make sense because that's a separate period. Now, it would have made sense if they wanted to make it an amalgam faction to give it Trebizond and Epirus to represent the Byzantine rump states that sort of emerged following the collapse of the Byzantine Empire after the Fourth Crusade. But this choice doesn't make any sense. The XL mod fixes that. So you've got Empire of Nicaea controlling Nicaea, right? And then you don't have Georgia and stuff. So that is nice to see. But you also have new factions here. So let's quickly take a look at the faction list, because it is definitely nice to see a lot of that. So you still have the Almohads instead of the Almoravids. A lot of the factions from the early campaign are still around. Aragon, the Armenians. You have the Ayyubids instead of the Fatimids. You have Bulgaria, which of course is this is the second Bulgarian Empire, which emerged a little bit prior to the Fourth Crusade. They're not in the early era, but they are here in the high era. I really like this about this mod, because they put effort into each era campaign. You can see this. And each faction. They didn't just add them in there because. You've got the Crusader states, Cyprus, and just the coast of the Levant at this point. Cumans are still around. The Danes. Who else is new for the high era? It might just be Bulgaria. Oh, there's also the Teutonic Order, which is very nice to see indeed. Very cool campaign up there for the Teutonic Order. And of course, a lot of the factions from the early era are still around. So let's quickly take a look at the high era campaign, the late era campaign. So again, in vanilla for the late era campaign is actually probably one of the most accurate of the vanilla era campaigns. So you've got the huge Mongol Empire in the east there. So I always felt that that made the late era pretty cool, having the huge Mongol Empire already around and sort of dominating in all over the place, really. And then, of course, Sicily is gone, replaced by Aragon controlling Sicily, and because Sicily was under the control of an Aragonese dynasty, it wasn't necessarily in union with Aragon, but it was controlled by an Aragonese dynasty. You've got, the French and English still going at it. Of course, Ireland is no longer a faction. Scotland is not there either. The Teutonic Order is still around. Sorry, I'm confusing this with the XL campaign. Anyway, and the other thing, of course, done by Vanilla was the Crusader states are represented as sort of colonies of the Western factions. That's not such a bad representation. That's, of course, how it was done in original Chivalry Total War as well, mod for Rome Total War. So, and of course, Medieval 2 actually sort of simulates that as well in its Crusade mechanics. But actually, the start positions are pretty decent here. So then you have the late period XL campaign. So, of course, much more interesting in general due to having so many more factions, but also much more historically accurate start positions here. So that's really nice to see. That's something, I place importance in. So you take a look at the vanilla late period. Aragon doesn't control this sort of Valencia region there, which it does in the XL version. That's the first thing that pops into my mind. Another thing is there's more factions, so things are a little bit different. The Byzantine start position is actually pretty similar, but the Byzantines don't have roads in the in the XL version, and that's actually quite accurate. They should not have roads there. So again, just due to having more factions, that automatically makes it less gamey, right? So let's quickly take a look down. Let's see if there are new factions in the late era. I believe there are. So again, you still have a lot of the same factions from the early era, like Aragon, Armenia, Bohemia. And you have the Bulgarians still around in the late era. You have the Burgundians for the late era. That's actually pretty cool to see. The Burgundian campaign, quite interesting. Burgundian history is quite interesting in and of itself. You have Castile. You have the Crusader states who are just left with Cyprus, basically. You've got Genoa still with a sort of amalgam thing going on there. But Genoa, due to the sort of province divisions, here Genoa doesn't really get any of its colonies, which is unfortunate. You have the Mongols. It's called the Golden Horde. Of course, these southern territories should be the Ilkhanate. And they should have a little more territory there, but it's okay. It's okay. Now, Hospitallers as a faction in the late era, that is very nice to see indeed. Very cool. I've never played that campaign. That's actually pretty interesting. In vanilla, of course, you had the southern Iberian Peninsula controlled by the North African, the Moors, right? But here you have the Nasrids, actually. But, they have the Nasrids controlling all of that. I'm not sure how accurate that is. There is the Nasrid Kingdom of Granada, I know, but I don't think the Nasrids were also in control of that, the entirety of the Maghreb there. That's not right. Then you have, of course, you still have Lithuania. Lithuania, of course, Christian in the late era. You have Novgorod. You have the Ottomans controlling a odd amount of territory there. Still pretty much the same. You have the Mamluks replacing the Ayyubids, of course. Mamluks, huge superpower in this time. The superpower of the East, aside from the Mongols. And then you have Portugal finally controlling all of Portugal, we imagine, is Portugal. Still have Scotland. The Serbs, Sweden, controlling a lot more territory. The Teutonic Order controlling a little more territory. And Venice with its colony here in Crete. So that is actually pretty much everything to show you about XL here in terms of the campaigns. So let's actually start a campaign here, and I'll show off some of the new units. Okay, so here we are in the campaign. We are playing, we are the Armenians in the late era campaign. So this is the 1321 start date. Interesting choice here. Usually you would say King Leon IV for the king at this time, but they're actually going by counting Prince Leon I, who was not a king, but it was a prince of the region. So through that count, that's how you get King Leon V. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of the units here that are added are pretty much the same as vanilla units in terms of their design and gameplay, but because there are so many new factions, it became imperative to add a lot of new units. So you've got, the D-Devils, which are sort of noble heavy cavalry, right? You would say these are the Naharars from Broken Crescent, right? You've got heavy Armenian infantry, and this goes for pretty much every single one of the new factions, right? And so from vanilla actually has the Armenian cavalry, but this mod, of course, adds more units, right? And a lot of the other new factions, they did have representative units in vanilla medieval Total War, like Serbia and the others, but they didn't have a lot of unique units, of course, because there were no major factions in that region, right? So they were just sort of AOR units for the other major factions. But this mod is a very complete mod. It doesn't feel incomplete in any respect, except in terms of descriptions sometimes. But as you can see, this mod does a pretty good job of adding a lot of stuff. Now, in terms of the battle mechanics, the graphics, it's pretty much the same as vanilla. And that's pretty okay with me, because vanilla is done so well. It's pretty much my favorite vanilla Total War game, behind perhaps Shogun 2 and maybe Napoleon, as a vanilla game. Right, because usually I play modded Total Wars like Rome and Medieval 2. Hard for me to play just vanilla now with so many mods out. But Medieval, I've always been able to play and enjoy a lot vanilla. But yeah, this mod, Medieval XL, super interesting mod, super good. I recommend you check it out. It's really nice indeed. Also, I should mention the buildings. Most of the buildings are pretty similar to vanilla. A lot of these you'll recognize from vanilla. Again, I really like the Medieval Total War buildings more than Medieval 2's buildings. I think Medieval 2 did a little too much consolidation. And if actually when you play a mod like Chivalry Total War for Rome 1 and Chivalry Remastered for Rome Remastered, you'll see that it takes a lot of inspiration from Medieval 1 Total War. So you get that sort of more complex building system. Of course, you have units that require 2 or more buildings rather than just one building, as in Medieval 2. So there's so much good about this game, and this mod just adds more and more on top of that. So that's pretty much everything I have to say about Medieval XL, because it's pretty much the vanilla experience of Medieval Total War. If you want to see me do a playthrough of vanilla Medieval Total War or of this mod, playing through this mod would pretty much be a vanilla experience, except for all the new stuff that's been added. So perhaps I'll do it with this mod anyway. If you'd like to see more Medieval 1 stuff, let me know, because I've figured out a way to record it without having everything crash on me, so I can do it now. If you enjoy videos about the historical Total Wars and their mods, consider liking this video, consider subscribing to the channel. I have a lot more content coming, especially on Rome Remastered mods. So, I'll see you in the next one later.